In 2016, The Magnificent Seven released in theaters, back when that was still a normal thing to happen, with Denzel Washington, Chris Pratt, Ethan Hawke, and others. It was a Western, and the basic plot runs along the lines of outlaw takes advantage of small-town farmers, farmers hire professional gunmen to defeat the outlaws, and the professional gunmen gain some level of endearment to the small-town way of life. So several decide to live there, while the rest literally ride off into the sunset, and the townspeople live happily ever after. It was a good film, in its own way, but it was not original. It was a remake of a 1960 film called The Magnificent Seven, this one starring Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson, James Coburn, Eli Wallach, and a host of other stars from the era. It's the same plot, the same basic character archetypes, the same resolution. But isn't that just what we expect from a remake? I mean, after all, 1960's The Magnificent Seven was itself a remake. Sort of. In 1954, the legendary filmmaker Akira Kurosawa released Seven Samurai, the legend of a village raided by bandits again and again, whose inhabitants turn to seven ronin, samurai without a lord or master, to free them from the bandits. Is this all starting to sound familiar? Well, it should, if you're a Pixar fan, because it's the same plot that they used for A Bug's Life. Comedy fans will recognize it as the same underlying story behind The Three Amigos. This remake trend goes on and on through the 1970s with The Invincible Six, the 1980s, Battle Beyond the Stars. The fact is, without stealing from Seven Samurai, those movies don't get made. Without the storytelling tropes Kurosawa basically invented when he made his film, the Avengers would have never assembled. The Death Star wouldn't have been destroyed for the first, or second, or third time. In short, many legendary stories wouldn't be the same. Perhaps they wouldn't even exist. Hello everyone and welcome to the Upstairs Table. I'm Andrew, a GM, and I want to help you be a better storyteller at your next session. Taking inspiration from the stories you love is a great way to exercise your storytelling muscle. Whether it's converting basketball into your very own version of Quidditch, or revealing that the asthmatic Dark Lord is actually the Space Warlock's patron. There's nothing wrong with letting your favorite movies or books inspire you. Have you ever borrowed from a movie or a book for your campaign and your players loved it? Tell us about it with a comment below. Pablo Picasso said, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." Igor Stravinsky said, "Lesser artists borrow, great artists steal." "Immature artists imitate, mature artists steal," said Lionel Trilling. "Immature poets imitate, mature poets steal." T.S. Eliot. Wow. You even stole your quote about stealing art? Throughout time, some of the greatest artists and storytellers, from Picasso to Aaron Sorkin, have looked to their predecessors for inspiration. It's not that they weren't imaginative on their own, but rather that great art often arises from a re-examination of old ideas. New perspectives, new analysis, or new outcomes all contribute to making a new piece of art truly original, even if it was inspired by the work of someone else. So what can we as GMs learn? You need to be careful about what you steal and how much you take. Obvious cases of plagiarism aside, here are a couple things to avoid. 1. Don't steal everything. Don't take an entire story and just reskin it into your world. If you want to base your campaign on Lord of the Rings or Mad Max, talk to your players about running your campaign in that world. More often than not, your players will probably be excited about a campaign where they get to be students at Hogwarts, or child warriors forced to participate in the Hunger Games. 2nd, no matter how cool they are, stay away from truly iconic moments. The Lich reaches out towards the orphan rogue with an open hand, an invitation to join him in evil. With a hiss, the Lich says, "I am your father." Even if you're someone who has somehow never seen Star Wars, you know that line. This moment isn't epic, it's just kind of lame. And it breaks immersion in the story because it reminds everyone at the table about Star Wars, which is a real thing in the real world, so it completely pulls you out of the moment and back into reality. Third, don't steal an entire situation, just take aspects of it. Instead of entire scenes or sequences, let individual moments inspire you. The T-Rex in Jurassic Park escaping the paddock and chasing the heroes down the road. Alibaba discovering the thieves' stash by overhearing the password "Open Sesame." Or Jack Sparrow revealing he has taken a piece of cursed gold. So how can we adapt these moments, these ideas, these little situations into something usable at our table? Let's take a look at a couple of my favorite examples. One of my favorite stories to steal from is The Count of Monte Cristo. I love scenes in a ballroom or maybe at a festival where the villain and the players come into contact with each other, but the players aren't able to do anything about it. Either because they're not yet strong enough to face the villain head on, maybe they don't even know he's the villain, or more likely, the social scenario that they're in would cause way too much collateral damage, and they're here to protect the villagers and save them, not get them killed in the crossfire. There's a great example of this kind of scene in The Count of Monte Cristo. There's a ball being thrown at a very wealthy family's mansion, and Edmond Dantes, alias the Count of Monte Cristo, attends. See, he knows that the family throwing this party, well, the father of the family is one of the 3 men responsible for his false imprisonment. Now, he's not here to complete his revenge. He's actually here on a reconnaissance mission. He wants to get to know more about his enemy and learn just how deep he can bury that knife and fully exact his revenge. But there's a complication that he doesn't expect. See, his ex-lover from before he was thrown in prison, Mercedes, has in his absence married this man, this enemy of his. And that creates an important conflict for Edmond Dantes. How much is he willing to do to exact his revenge? Now, if I was going to take this and interpret it into my own story, I'd probably leave out the Mercedes part. It assumes too much about what the character's involvement might be, and it railroads them a little bit too much. So I'd probably cut that out. What I would leave intact, more than anything else, and really the only thing I would take, is that idea of letting the characters, letting your players face the villain in a situation where they're unable to do the job. And encourage them instead, through roleplay or through other actions, to get to know their villain better. Maybe find a weakness, find some opportunity to break through their literal and metaphorical armor. Another example is that great scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when Indy's running through the cave, only to have a boulder emerge and begin rolling after him, and he must run for his life or be crushed. It's a great scene, and this kind of gets a little bit close to the idea of too iconic to steal, but if we tweak it a little bit and change things, I think it becomes okay, and I think it becomes usable. There's a classic trap that's been in D&D since the beginning, and I've seen so many YouTubers and DMs and great GMs use this in their own games. And that's a gelatinous cube trap. There's nothing more menacing than having a narrow hallway that the players are working their way down, only for a gelatinous cube to fall from the ceiling when a trap is triggered and begin slowly slurping its way toward the party. It's a cool trap, it's a great danger moment, but really what it is that Raiders of the Lost Ark moment translated into a D&D world. Our third and final example comes from a game at my own table. We were running the Curse of Strahd, and when it came to Strahd, I wanted to do something out of the ordinary. Yeah, I could go for the easy choice of making it another Russian vampire, speaking with heavy accent all game, dropping articles who needs the word the. Am I right? But that's old, that's tired, it's been done before. I wanted something different. So I looked around through literature and movies for a character that could carry the same sort of authority, in a scene. The same sense of mystery where you want to learn more about them, but that element of unknowability where you feel like you never will. And I settled on Captain Nemo. He's a great character where he's both a villain and a hero in the original Jules Verne novel. But I especially loved the way he was portrayed by James Mason in the Disney version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And so that's who I settled on.
You see, for my players, they had never seen that film. So I could use the voice, which, while it's a pretty poor interpretation, a pretty poor impersonation, it was nevertheless a voice that was unique. It stood out, and it allowed me to portray a sense of calm presence.
I loved doing the voice and figuring out how to kind of speak from the back of the throat like that, but more than anything, it was the way that James Mason carried himself in that film that I really tried to bring as a presence to Stradvin Zarovich. If you've never seen that movie, I encourage you to check it out. It's a great characterization of Nemo and well worth watching. So steal from what inspires you. Stealing does not mean ripping off, reskinning, or plagiarizing. There's effective use of familiar tropes or visuals which ought to be more broadly used, and then there's unimaginative and unapologetic broad daylight robbery of someone else's creative work which should be avoided at all costs. Thanks for letting us here at the Upstairs Table steal your time today. If you'd like to support the channel and see more videos like this, please subscribe and click on the bell to get notifications when new videos come out. But what did you think? Is stealing okay for a GM when building a story? Let us know with a comment. And remember, there's room for everyone at the table.